It's the last prospect show that we're going to have where we're diving deep into these NBA draft prospects. So we're going to end up covering a big chunk of them. The final ones are here today. Michael Bolton, he's also here every day.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and wouldn't you like to know, Weather Boy? I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. And we are, of course, available on all platforms. It's double bang time. Your thumb, your bell, your comment. Draft prospects. We love talking about them. We love diving into them. We are going to do way more draft stuff after this. There's going to be mock drafts coming, big boards, other discussions around the draft with other draft analysts, maybe even some of the same ones coming back on. But we like to get a baseline of all these guys, about 60 or 70 guys I think we would have covered at this point. And it really helps us sort of just to get an understanding of where we are with these players. We can always go back and rewatch these and go through them as the season progresses. So we've got one more guest coming on to talk prospects, and we'll get into it right now, I guess. He's back again. Chuck from Chucking Darts, back to talk NBA draft. Chuck, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. This is great. I'm so honored to be part of your lineup. You've been doing great draft work this year, and I'm coming in as the closer, which is phenomenal. What a position to be in.
You are. You're taking up the remaining batch of prospects that we haven't covered off here. This will come out a couple of days from when we're recording this, but yesterday was the withdrawal deadline, and there's another withdrawal deadline coming up later on, so it's all over the place. I know that, but a lot of the guys went back, and I think we escaped pretty much unscathed with. There was about 4 or 5 guys that I did prospect things for that went back to school, but that's all good. They're all done and dusted. I just have to quickly say, Chuck, the neon lighting behind you there for you to watch a video that you definitely didn't have that last year, and just upping the studio levels over there at Dart HQ.
That's right. With the nonstop revenue that my show produces, I gotta reinvest. So
absolutely,
my adless show, this is what adless buys. So
yep.
I like it. It was a gift from my wife, my lovely wife. Shout out to her. But less is more for me over here at Dart HQ.
For me, more is more, but also less is more. But I love that. I love that neon thing. It looks awesome. Let's talk prospects, because again, there are a handful of guys that I haven't really covered off, and we're going to start with someone who is getting some buzz at the moment. He's one of the very, very few younger guards who is going to go relatively high, or is getting some buzz across the class at the moment. We're going to head across to the ACC. We're going to head to Duke, and we're going to talk about Jared McCain, who, again, maybe he sneaks into the lottery, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. He's 20. He's 6'3". He averaged 18 and 6 per 40. 21 usage, which is not particularly high, but a good 3-point attempt rate. He hit his free throws at an insane level. Really strong, effective field goal percentage for McCain. So we look at him. The size is iffy. Like, it's there. It's all right. Like, he's not gigantic. Is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? What sort of a guard are we looking at with a Jared McCain?
It's a great question. I think that Jared is one where you look at this draft and you look at his shooting talent, which very well may be the very best in the draft. And I'm including everybody: Dalton Connect, Reed Shepherd, whoever, Shireman, whoever you want to throw in that pool. Jared may be a better shooter than all of them, but shooting guards in the modern NBA are required to do a lot more than shoot. Most of the time, unless you are a top 2 offensive option on your team, the shooting guard position is getting into wing territory. And so you've got to be like a bulldog on defense. If you're undersized, you need to be Alex Caruso. You need to be Deuce McBride. You need to be Derek White. You need to be able to guard your position and guard up. And that's the real question with Jared, is whether or not he can really do that to an appreciable extent. He's strong and he's very, very smart, but I don't believe he's of the same athletic mold as those guys. I think his wingspan at the combine was like 6'3.5", which is, unimpressive. And as a freshman, one and done entering the league, it's going to be a very long time before any team would ever rely on him for his defense. And so that leaves the question of whether or not he's really a bench offensive spark plug guard, which I think being mocked, late teens, early 20s is sort of what people are kind of thinking of him, myself included. Or do you see a real offensive upside where he could, in sort of a Fred VanVleet-ish sort of way, start at point guard for an NBA team in time? Fred entered the league at 22 after spending a long, fruitful career at Wichita State. And McCain's trying to do it differently, coming in a one and done. It will take his body time, but he is a player that has some real offensive upside. It's just a matter of how much you believe in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like, you don't like these 0 or +0 wingspan type players. Like, he's already on the shorter side. He doesn't make up for it. Like, Donovan Mitchell's 6'4" or 6'3", whatever, but he's like a +6 wingspan sort of a player. So he's not, he's functionally not 6'3". He's like a lot bigger than that, and he's able to utilize that offensively. He's able to utilize that defensively, and McCain's not really able to do that. Unfortunately, the shooting is elite though. Like, we're talking 41% on good volume, on great free throw numbers, great projections moving forward as well. Is there a worry with, and I talked about this a couple of days ago regarding Reed Shepherd, like the shooting is great, like it's awesome, but at the smaller end of things, like when you get in there against bigger NBA athletes, is he going to be bothered more by that? Like in college, you can get away with a little bit more because you don't have those guys with that are 6'8", 6'9", with gigantic wingspans in many different positions. Like you can get away with it. Like is he going to be bothered, do you think, by the additional length impacting the shot?
Certainly a little bit in the beginning. I mean, Jared's very clever though. And so I think that in terms of like using himself as a screener and then popping off of that, or using himself as a ghost screener and relocating off of that, he'll find ways to find space. I mean, that's really what the NBA is for to a large extent, is that if you're offensively talented, then you'll find the space in the NBA to take advantage of your gifts. Just because every offense, the defense has to respect everyone as a scoring threat so much. But the issue where the length would really bother him is when he's attacking closeouts or when he's trying to operate out of pick and roll, because that's where at Duke, I think his lack of burst at this stage of the game really showed, is that he couldn't create very easy separation. And even though he shot over 50% on twos, which is, again, very encouraging, this latent offensive upside that he's got, it still was like he really had to pick his spots. He had to wait until he thought he had a mismatch, or if he's maybe operating off of a cut and he's attacking the paint where maybe the big was out guarding Filipowski, who operated as their 5. So he got some easier layup attempts than normal. Like, he had to be very strategic. In the NBA, where basically if he's attacking a closeout, he's going to be attacking a 6'6" guy with a 6'9" wingspan. That's where I think there's going to be real problems, which is where I think it comes down to either he's a backup and he can operate against backups, or if you really believe in him, then he's going to have to be running pick and roll, getting picks all the time to create that space as a starting point guard.
Using the advanced comparisons over on Wizzy's site, which you may or may not have seen, which just compares a bunch of advanced numbers and per 40 numbers. There's physical ones as well. There are 4 names who come up on multiple different ones of these search things for Jared McCain. And there's context behind all of them. But I'll give you these 4 names, and you can tell me which one of those seems more likely a result for maybe where McCain can go. So one of them is someone who played at Duke as well, and that was Gary Trent Jr. We have a guy from last year's draft, Grady Dick. There is Devin Booker at Kentucky. Now, Devin Booker, Kentucky is a very different player to Devin Booker now, remember that. And then there's Kyle Guy, who played at Virginia. So out of those, they're the 4 guys who sort of came across as the best statistical comps for many different categories for Jared McCain. Like, what's the sort of outcome level with those guys?
I think out of those 4, the one that I would hone in on is Gary Trent Jr., because he also, I believe he was at Duke, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was,
but he was also a one and done that was like kind of a surprise one and done when he left, because I think he might have been on the Jason Tatum team 2017, but he was like a supporting player. And for him to just say I'm going one and done, maybe it was in an era where one and done was just more expected and more acceptable. But I don't believe he was a first round pick coming out of that.
He wasn't.
And
he was in the second round for sure.
And I'm sure, as you know, having gotten more and more into the draft, one and dones in the second round don't typically hit. I mean, you're stepping into the abyss when you do that. And the reason that Trent was able to find a role is because he's a high volume 3-point shooter, and that was his MO at Duke. So he can help other talent by being that sort of roving threat. I think he's probably a bit of a more effective movement shooter at the same age than Jared was. Jared, I think, probably does a little bit more off the dribble. But the weakness for Trent, the question on him was always, how well does he really hold up defensively? And how good is his burst? Like, can he really get to the rim in the way that a starter needs to be able to get to the rim? And I think over the course of his career, you've seen that mostly the answer to that is no. I think he had one really good season in Toronto where he was among the league leaders in steals. Like, his hands just got super, super active. But I don't remember what Clark's wingspan measurements were. I imagine they were probably more encouraging, because Jared's are just really not encouraging.
Yeah,
but
Trent's also like an inch or so tall. I think he's like 6'4" or so, and that was that. But that random season was pretty much an L. I think there was a lot of Nick Nurse involvement in that Trent sort of defensive breakout as well. And we saw that the numbers dropped this season, and they were bad when he was in Portland as well. So I think that's one of those ones we go, that was really weird, and then it sort of disappeared. But we've got some other guys we're going to talk about. We'll get to them in a second, Chuck. But first of all, I'm going to tell people that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports as well, and get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick between 2 to 6 individual player stat projections. You choose more than or less than, and that's it. You bang them into a lineup and off you go. With as little as 4 of them, you can actually get 100 times your money back. $10 in, $1,000 out. That is fantastic. We've got the NBA playoffs. We've got the NHL playoffs. We've got Major League Baseball, PGA Tour, NASCAR. I think they do NASCAR. I'm pretty sure they do. There's disc golf, of course, one of the greatest DFS sports out there that you can play. And Prize Picks has all of it. Chuck, I hear you laughing in the background, but disc golf is popular. I poo-pooed it first as well. And then people will go, nah, man, you got to get in on disc golf. So, all right, we're a disc golf family now. So, yeah, we're in disc golf.
I'm just acknowledging it's popular where I live, too. That's why. It's because it was out of recognition. Yes, absolutely.
Good old disc golf. So Prize Picks has got it. Get your favorite disc golf guys into an entry and download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That is, download the app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. First deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It is that easy. All right, so we are ready to talk more disc golf here with Chuck. Disc golf draft prospects. Let's get into the next.
Chucking discs. Let's go.
All right, yeah, there you go. The brand is strong. The next guy we're going to talk about. You mentioned this guy before, Fred VanVleet, and we're going to talk KJ Simpson, who is unbelievably like the third Colorado prospect that I'm talking about who could go in the top 35, which doesn't seem right, but it is. There's a lot of these guys here. So KJ Simpson is, if you understand that I'm talking Fred VanVleet, you understand that he's a point guard who is short and he's coming in a little bit older. He's 22 years of age almost. He's 6'1", so that is obviously really small for any sort of NBA player, but that is VanVleet. Now, we can always look at that and go, well, Fred VanVleet, he does this, but that is always usually, that's the exception, that's the outlier. But the numbers that we see from KJ, they're interesting. 6.6 rebounds per 40, 22 points, 1.8 steals, 27 usage on a team with Cody Williams and Tristan da Silva. Strong free throws, efficient player. The assist rate is there. So where are we with him? Again, a little bit older, a little bit shorter. Is the height just not something that you just go, I'm ruling him out completely, but where you're saying you're going to have to prove a lot, and your excuses are going to be minimal because I'm just not going to forgive as much when you come in at 6'1"?
A little bit of both. I mean, the thing about KJ is that if you watch that Colorado team consistently, Like, he was their leader. He was their general. Everyone sort of lined up behind him. And so anytime you have a team that has multiple prospects, but there was one that clearly was sort of the heartbeat of the team, and I think Colorado had high expectations. They didn't quite meet preseason, but they were still one of the best offenses in the country when they were healthy. And it really started with KJ. And so I think the opinion about him from an NBA perspective is whether or not it's about what you want to do with your backup initiator role. Like, again, up until about 5 years ago, it's not uncommon to have someone 6'1" operating in those minutes because you wanted to have a capital P point guard. Now, because so many stars are staggered and so many people of different sizes can handle the ball and initiate, a lot of teams, the backup, so to speak, minutes that you're getting end of the first quarter, early second quarter, you're like Brandon Ingram's running the offense. You're like, Jesus, not exactly 6'1" anymore. There's still a place, obviously, for players like that because you see TJ McConnell, you see Jose Alvarado, these are guys that get minutes. But both of those guys provide, again, getting back to VanVleet, a lot of defensive value. They are pests on the ball against opposing bench ball handlers. And that's part of the reason why they can win their minutes. And so, again, with KJ, who's a really good, really smart offensive player and like a very willing defender, it's just about whether or not you think the defense is to a level to where he can win minutes in the NBA against his counterparts. The offense, I think, is there and is good enough. It's just a matter of whether the defense holds water.
The adjective that most of those players will have attached to their name is scrappy, is, TJ, Jose, like they're out there, like just being annoying, like just being a pain in the ass, really, and just putting that pressure on. And even Fred VanVleet, he not made his name, but one of the things he was able to do is be like really solid defensively, generate a ton of steals, be a really strong shot blocker for someone his size as well. And then a lot of the other stuff came along. Is KJ that? Like, he did a lot offensively for Colorado, but does he have that ability to sort of transition his game? Like, 2.7% steal percentage is good. We always want a baseline of around 2 for that. Like, you're doing more than that, that's great. Like, is he someone who can become that player and build on that part of his game, and then if other stuff comes, it comes? But like, or is he? That's not really what he's shown so far.
I don't know that he's shown it a ton. Like, he's, again, very willing, and I don't think his wingspan is like horrendous. You might have those measurements, but I thought he was
6'4", I think.
Yeah, and that is not horrendous. Like, I think that's in sort of Mike Conley kind of range.
Sounds about right.
But the real question is whether or not lessening the offensive burden that he had at Colorado will allow him to tap into the defense more. Like, there's no doubt that KJ knows that that's what he's going to need to do. He's a very smart kid. And so it's this eternal question. I mean, traditional draft history says that the best way to find NBA role players is to find college players who had a lot of responsibilities and just shrink it. And that's how you get the efficient supporting player. And so by that metric, KJ might be your guy. And because he is very manipulative, because he has he has more bounce than you think he does. I think he had like 11 or 12 dunks this year, which for, 6'1" guy is plenty. Like, I think there is reason to be optimistic. And when you get to a certain stage in this draft, which is going to be, 20 through 45, 25 through 45 or whatever, a lot of teams, like I said before, when talking about McCain, like, they don't want to take one and dones. They would think that all the best projects have already been selected. They just want someone who they know can come in and that they're not going to like teach a bunch of stuff. And that's KJ. And if he starts out in the G League operating a G League team and helping younger players in the G League get organized and everything, then that's what he'll do. And if he ever displays the strength and the lateral quickness to play NBA defense, then you have yourself a really nice player, and it's a pretty good use of a draft pick. I wouldn't hold my breath that he's going to be one of like the 15 or 20 best players in the class. I don't know that he's ever going to have like an Andrew Nembhard kind of breakout, to cite sort of another player in this mold, because Nembhard was a lot bigger than he is. But I think he can be on that spectrum. And I think that maybe not this year, but maybe next year, like 25, 26, when he gets closer to his physical prime in his mid-20s, I think he'll be able to hang on an NBA floor.
There are some times when I run the stat similarities, and they give a similarity score. And there was a player that I did, I think yesterday, and the score was like 78 out of 100, which is really, really low. For KJ, there's some really high similarity guys, and most of the list, I'll be honest with you, Chuck's pretty bad. Nigel Williams-Goss, Nate Walters, Peyton Pritchard, all right, that's fine. Malachi Flynn, Frank Mason, like it's not great. Isaiah Kanan, okay. But then we get to a really small guard who was successful in college, who went in the second round, who has now established himself as a top 5 MVP candidate. His name's Jalen Brunson. So, obviously, we're to talk Fred VanVleet, the outlier production, undrafted, small. Like, is Fred VanVleet even 6 foot? I really have my doubts, but that's, these are the outliers. But Jalen Brunson is here on this list. So when we're talking 6 or 7 statistical comps and Brunson's name comes up, there is, like, I guess, that level of hope that you come in, you be a role player, which Brunson was for 2 years or whatever, and then we see where it goes. And from everything that you say and everything that I've seen about KJ, the mentality probably is there to take that path. He's not going to be like, look at me, I'm going to do everything immediately, but working into that. And I think that, again, like you said, taking that guy pick 30 to 37, and people go, if he does end up turning into a star, why didn't you go earlier? Because like that path is unlikely. But you get that guy there, and then we see what happens. I'm really warming to what KJ is able to produce, and I'm excited to see. Like, it is tough at that height, but at that portion of the draft, like, and the teams that are going to be picking there, it's going to be interesting because usually the top of the second round, Chuck, it's the bad teams, but basically all those bad teams have traded away their second round picks, so they don't actually have the picks in that zone. So it'll be maybe some of the smarter teams who have selections there, which will make things really intriguing when it comes around to those 30 to 36 type picks, 38 type picks.
Yep. And I just real quick on the Brunson point, like KJ, the main difference between him and Brunson was National Player of the Year, won 2 national titles. And even though he was a small guard, he scored as if he was a wing because he shot 70% at the rim, which is like really, that's what Cody Williams, his teammate, did. And on like much, 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 much more volume. KJ, by contrast, shot 55% at the rim, which is like average to below average on a lot of volume. Everything at like 88% from the line, 43% from 3 on a ton of volume. Like, he's a talented scorer, but Jalen was able to tap into physical dominance in college over his competition. And KJ is more of like a manipulator he's more of like a craftsman or a scientist. And that's really, it's like very cool, especially for like a scout to watch. But I don't think it scales all the way up in the NBA unless you can establish consistent physical advantages like Jalen could.
The easy bet on all these guys is just, it's not going to happen. But that's how it works. But we always want to look for individual little things that maybe, and work ethic and mentality and the way that you adjust up and down in your game. And that's one of the things I look at more now. Is like, when the role calls or something, do you scale up? Do you scale down? Do you do this? Do you pull back? Are you able to adjust? And then when the time comes, move into what you need to do. And I think that's one of those things that's, I'm focusing on more. I'm not saying it's overlooked by others, but I think that's one of those things that does become interesting when we're talking draft and scouting. Now, we're going to head from Duke, we're going to head from Colorado, and we're going to go to the national champions. I think this might be the 4th player that I've actually done, or we've actually looked at from Connecticut. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but this is Tristen Newton. Actually did it Alex Caravan. Now he's gone back to school, so that's a bit of an L on that one, but that's okay. All right, Tristen Newton. We're talking about a 6'5", 23-year-old who, again, just part of that super strong Connecticut team. When you see a team like Connecticut that's super strong over these last couple of seasons and all these names become well known to a lot of people and there's a lot of production, when you look at that, you go, all right, they're great. They're contributing to all this winning and this team being this good. Or do you look at it, it's like almost a rising tide lifting all boats, that he's got these other guys around who are so good that the numbers then get maybe artificially inflated. So do you look at these role-ish type players on these really strong teams? They're not these are huge role player, 25 usage, 33 minutes, the average 19, 8, and almost 8 assists as a 6'5" guy. Like they're per 40 minutes, they're insane numbers. But is it like, is that like, all right, yeah, but you're doing it because you're playing for Connecticut, or is it like, no, this is legit?
I think it's pretty legit. Now, I think we were just talking about Brunson and Villanova. I think this Connecticut team this past year was probably the best college team since that Villanova team. And that had, everyone on the Knicks plus Mikal Bridges.
Mhm.
And so obviously that team was really, really good. And everyone from that team was undervalued as a draft prospect, really, except for Bridges, who went 10th.
Yep.
Everyone else went outside the lottery, but has returned lottery value, more or less. In Connecticut's case, their offense is designed to lift all boats because there's so many like screens and reads from everyone. Anyone could cut anywhere at any time. Klingon can come up and be a high post hub and find guys cutting and misdirecting the defense. So from that perspective, I think there was a little bit of a rising tide. But when they needed some on-ball creativity, Tristen was really the only guy who could do it. Castle, like very good player, very good prospect, but not that shifty. He's like a hammer. You know, he's brute strength. Cam Spencer, like off the ball, really hard to guard and drag around. He's sort of the Jordan Hawkins role, but he didn't do a ton on the ball. Caravan, great cutter, great gap filler, great connector, but he's not going to be running a lot of pick and roll. The guy who was really creative in making sure that everything was running on schedule was Newton. Kind of similar to KJ, but I like Tristen more than KJ because he's bigger and I think he's a more creative passer. And he just did, like, if there's anything you would want from any player really, but from a point guard, assist to turnover ratio, excellent. Assist percentage, excellent. Can he offensive rebound? Yes. Can he rebound out of his area? Yes. Can he find creative ways to score? Yes, because Tristen was one of the most creative guys at drawing fouls, in the country. And when you have all of these little areas that he excels in, it leads me to believe that he will find his spot on an NBA floor because I don't think that he is too small. So I'm a big fan of Tristen. Big fan.
The thing is, like, you look at his numbers and they're crazy to me. Like those, 19, 8, and 8 per 40 minutes. All this is pace adjusted. That's insane. 50% 3-point attempt rate, almost 50% free throw rate. Like, that's ridiculous. 2.5 assist to turnover ratio. Unbelievable. 25 usage. It's not that he's getting 38 usage and he's dominating the ball every time. That's well within that range. And you talked about it before. These guys who then can scale back down and be role players at the NBA level. He had 81% from the line. Like, this is all really good. Effective field goal, 50%. Yep. Like, so why is this like a name that honestly, like, I just hear nobody talking about? Why is he is it age? Because it's not size that's against him. It's not production that's against him. It's not, I think, versatility that's against him. So what is it? What's keeping him from being someone that pushes, probably maybe even 10 spots higher than where people are having him at the moment?
It's 3 very common biases. Age is certainly one. Pedigree is another, because he wasn't a big-time recruit. He went to East Carolina for 3 years before transferring. Mm-hmm. And it's the fact that when you watch him on tape, like, he's not an outlier athlete. He doesn't, like, again, getting back to KJ, like, he doesn't physically dominate people. He still finds ways to be dominant because he is so good at setting up his defender and forcing contact that is, like, not flopping. Like, he forces them to foul him by outthinking his defender, and he gets all these calls. His free throw rate was nearly 50% at Connecticut for 2 years.
It's crazy.
And because that's the way he goes about his business, and like I said, relatively unheralded and older, then guys are going to be like, well, how many lottery picks does Connecticut really have? We have Castle and Klingon. Everyone else is going to, take a back seat. But the most outstanding player in the Final Four this year was Tristen Newton. And the most outstanding player in the last year's Final Four was Tristen Newton. And that's no accident. Like, there's not been a stage in college basketball that he has not excelled in. All the stuff that he does, it's not like his rebounding has plummeted against better competition or his free throw rate has plummeted against better competition. It's all there. I think he would get probably more love if his 3-point percentage was higher. But when you watch him play, he takes really ballsy threes. He will take threes off the dribble from like 28 and just like launch it. And so again, it's the shrinking the role question, like you said. I believe that someone with this level of feel, because I think his level of feel is among the best in the draft, just pure basketball feel. I just think that he's going to succeed. So I have him in my late 20s right now, and I'd be happy to use a pick on him again. one of these good teams that wants a floor general. I think Tyler Kolek gets a lot of that shine. I would take Tristen every day of the week over Tyler Kolek.
Tyler Kolek, the old car salesman. That's I was talking about him the other day and said, like, he's either going to have one of those things where he turns into TJ McConnell, or he's going to go back to the hometown and just be the guy that appears on TV selling cars to everyone and go, remember me in college? Here, buy you a new truck from me. So like, I did not. He's one or the other. I don't really know where it's going to go with Tyler Kolek. I guess that's a better nickname than Johnny Furphy's. Let's move through to let's move through. Now we've talked Colorado, Big 12. We've gone to powerhouses, Connecticut. We've talked about Jared McCain from Duke. And now we talk about the NBA Academy Africa. We talk about Ulrich Chomche.
Chomche, I believe. Yeah.
We've got like 3 sort of games of data that we can look at. So like, I'll put the stats up. Like, I don't know what it's telling me. Like, it's hardly anything to pay attention to here. Like, a name that we were talking just before we went on air, like, no one had heard of this, not even heard of him. Like, no one had discussed this as a draft thing like 3 months ago. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if maybe it was a Gavoni tweeted out, hey, people are paying attention to this guy. We go, all right, are we? He's only 18.
Mm-hmm.
He's legit 18. Like, he is GG Jackson 18, like turning 19, I think November or December.
December 30th. Yeah.
3.5 blocks per 40, 17 and 12, 6'11". Yeah, again, these are 3 games of data, 64% 3-point, etc. That's a little iffy, but what the hell is this? Like, what are we doing here? Is it just like upside, projectability, rim protection, athleticism? I have no idea. Like, there have been draft prospects in the past where finding information on their games has been tough. One of the worst for that was like a Dante Exum, because he just never played in the pre-draft process. There was no games ever. This is getting close to that. I don't know what to do with old mate Chomche here.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to know what to do with him, but I can sketch out why teams like him and provide some context. So he grew up Cameroon, French speaker, and he played soccer until he was about, like, I think 13 was the first time he picked up a basketball.
Yeah, heard this story before, haven't we?
That's exactly right, which was Joel Embiid.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when you consider his age, that he's about as young as you can possibly be. You would, like, if the year you can enter the draft, the first year you can is when you turn 19, and he turns 19 at the very end of this year.
Yep.
So it doesn't get any younger than him. If you imagine projecting, well, what if he went to college? You know, he's already 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan, and he's about 235 pounds. If he went to Kansas or Kentucky or something, can you imagine a similar sort of breakout to where he would be a consensus lottery pick in next year's draft or something like that? If you can, based on what little we've seen, then it makes sense to be fairly aggressive on him in a perceived weaker draft. So I've only really been able to watch the combine scrimmages for him in game action. What I can say is that I can see the vision a little bit. I think he's been coached to, like, get threes up, which at his age I don't love, just because I think when you have physical advantages, you need to capitalize on them, and it's not really capitalizing on them for him to shoot threes. It's for him to, like, figure out how to dominate around the rim first. But having said that, I think that for someone who's considered very raw, I think he has promising feel for the game. I think I saw him pass out of the short roll pretty quickly, kind of a la Derek Lively, a little bit in those games. Like, he showed the awareness. I saw him pass up a 3 because he saw a driving lane, and I think he got a foul call on that. And on defense, you know, the athleticism's obviously there. He was making blocks way out of area and recovery. He bit on one pump fake, but it's not like he looked like he was completely out of place. He had a little bit of that natural kind of soccer player, just nimbleness on his feet. And his hands are what I really liked on defense, because he's got very sort of active, I'm poking at the ball, I'm making this very difficult on you, kind of Tari Eason kind of hands. And that'll get fouls called on him, and that's fine. I would rather a prospect be very precocious and you'd have to rein him in than someone who just has their hands out and is playing it safe the whole time. Because if you play it safe against NBA caliber offensive players, they'll just toast you. So I liked what I saw for the most part from him. I think with all things, if you want to project him aggressively, you have to project his offense aggressively, given where the league is and where it's going. I have less of a feel for that, but he seemed pretty comfortable driving, pretty comfortable passing. He doesn't have a broken shot or anything. So, like, yeah, there's a real argument for him. And I wish I could be more aggressive, but with such a small sample size, I can't. But it's not like fake intrigue. I will say that. I think there'd be a similar level of intrigue on him regardless of the draft year. It's not just that, like, oh, well, this draft sucks, let's look for something. I think he has real stuff.
Have you watched any of these NBA Academy Africa games or any of the combine stuff?
Just the combine. I've not been able to watch the Africa stuff or find it. Maybe it's on Synergy or something, but I haven't been able to track it down.
I didn't think it was going to be available. I just found I'm actually, as you're talking, I've got it on the background here. I'm just watching this first game, NBA Academy Africa versus Cape Town Tigers. It looks all right. Like, it's hard to judge. Like, I don't know what the competition level is, but he moves all right. Like, you're right. He got up a ton of threes in those games. He blocked a lot of shots. He played pretty strong minutes. He played as a 4. So I don't know how that works, but like, this guy, like, he's 18. Like, I don't know if he's going to stop growing. Maybe he's going to be 7-1, 7-2. Like, there is, right. He's really, like, again, it's 3 games in this random setting against the Cape Town Tigers, Dynamo somebody, I don't know who that is, and Parsi BC. I don't know what those teams are. But it's there. We can have a look at it. And he doesn't look, we hear these guys who might pick up the basketball late and you go, they look at him, he plays like Marquise Chris, not someone who picked up a basketball late but just doesn't know where he is. Right, he's all over the shop. Right. From what I'm, like, again, this is 3 minutes of me just watching these little clips here. Like, it doesn't look like that. So that's really interesting.
I agree. And I think that you made the point about him possibly growing. I think that's where you'd really get some raised eyebrows, because at his age, again, a lot of these, you look even in this draft, Sarr is 18 turning 19 this year. He's young compared to typical one and dones. Same with Risache, same with Salon, same with Topic.
Yep.
So, like, this is the year, if you enter the NBA a year younger than most one and dones typically do, this is the time where you usually see, like, physical growth. And I think it's very important for Chomche because he's 6'11", 240. He'll add weight and whatever, but that is sort of like kind of average NBA big man size. And so I don't know that you can really project a lot of offensive explosion from him if he's just sort of roughly the size of his peers. But if he gets to 7 foot or 7'1" with like a 7'5" or 7'6" wingspan, and he can do all this, now you're really talking about something. And, just from what I've read, he's a very smart kid, came from a very sort of disciplined family who prioritized education. Like, when you talk about where to place him in a draft like this, the question to ask yourself is like, well, who would I really regret passing up? And in a draft like this, like that bar is a lot higher than you think it is, like in terms of pick value. I could make an argument that it makes more sense to take a shot on someone like Chomche than it is to draft like Dalton Connect. I don't know that I'd have him ranked over Dalton ultimately. I'm a little lower on Dalton than others. But like, so like, do you want a spot starter wing who is probably going to bounce around to multiple teams over the course of a 10-year career? Or do you want to take a shot on this kid? Are you really going to regret doing that? Like, I don't know. It's very intriguing with him. I'm glad we got to talk about him. And I'm glad we're both kind of optimistic.
Yeah, he's interesting. Now, there are going to be the people who do watch this and hear that Dalton Connect thing, and the people who are big, like, college basketball fluffers who will be like really like upset about that comparison. But I can frame it this way. I'm saying it maybe to rile people up, but you have a chance of drafting, maybe you are drafting Joel Embiid, or maybe you're drafting a worse Sadiq Bey. Like, I know which one of those I'd want to take in a draft. Out, obviously, that's a 1 in 100 outcome. Maybe what's 1 in 1,000. But that's, when I look at archetypes of players and the intrigue in that, and like, in 4 years' time, Chomche will be the same age as Dalton Connect, and then we'll have a discussion about where he's at there. But like those highlights are really interesting. That's a lot on someone who, again, there's just nothing to really go off. But I do encourage everybody. I might even link it in the description here to go and watch some of these Africa Academy highlight games, and just to see just the way he moves, the positioning, and just he seems in control, which I think is a huge thing. But he's not the only random bloke that we're going to be talking about here in this show, because the next two names are also names that people are going to be going, huh? Who? Let's talk about Malique Lewis from he's from the G League, but not the Ignite, from the Mexico City Capitans, and he is also, Chuck, he's someone that you said, I'm big on Malique Lewis. And I went, I'll be honest with you, I got no idea who you're talking about. I need to go and have a look at this. And he's from Trinidad and Tobago. He played for the Mexico City Capitans. He is 19. I didn't know that I'd see him on many people's big boards or mock drafts, but he was there. He was popping up towards the end of the second round. He's 6'8" as a forward. Now, the numbers, when we look at the per 40s, they're pretty low, like 13 and 9. Well, 1.6 blocks is nice. But again, he is playing in the G League, not for the Ignite, for a team that is a real team, so to speak. Low usage player, but took a lot of threes. What is it that you like about Malique Lewis?
I like his ability. You mentioned the shot blocking. That's what pops out the most when you watch Malique on tape, is that he gets off the ground very quickly and can really, really like erase stuff as a weak side helper at the rim. And that's something that is increasingly, necessary for any NBA team. Again, as your center is taken away from the rim by NBA offensive actions, you need guys who can sort of operate out of their area and make plays to erase stuff. And Malique can really, really do that. I think that he also has sort of in the G League, lots of times you're given, unless you are like a star that the team is prioritizing and they say, go do whatever you want. A lot of times players fulfill like a very specific role. And since he was a kid playing with guys older than him, his role, like they didn't run any plays for him. So from what I was able to see, which was not a ton, but from what I was able to see, I thought that he was more comfortable as a driver and a passer than you would imagine. He's not like, JT Toppin, who's going back to school. He was at New Mexico. I forget where, at Texas Tech. Maybe is where he's going after the draft process, but he's like a non-passer. He's like a black hole. He's just sprinting and dunking and finishing. Malique has a little bit more to his game. I believe he had a positive assist to turnover ratio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did. 1.16.
Yeah. So like when you see just the wing size and some feel for the game, I don't think that his shot is good enough for him to really get NBA minutes now. Like I think teams just wouldn't guard him, and that would probably sink his team for now. But I think in terms of a player to take a shot on, he has like real deal wing size, wing mobility, like true plus bounce, and he has some feel for the game. And it's just like, I don't think there's 50 players you'd rather have in this draft. I think that's silly. I think that you can, once you get into that chunk of 25 to 45 and you're looking at to make, the team's going to have to be somewhat patient, but that's like real upside. That is actual upside, where if the shot comes together, you have a legitimate contributor for your team. You're not like squinting and wishing on a star that someone's going to become more athletic than really they're ever going to be, which is what a lot of these second round picks come down to. If you were to take, I'll use Shireman, who I think is like a nice player, but he hasn't really grown as a player that much in the last year or two. He's just kind of out of eligibility now. Yep. So like, that's why I prefer taking a shot on someone like Malique. Yeah.
Well, some might say that you would be chucking darts at some of these prospects and seeing where they are, seeing where it pans out. Chuck, he's interesting. Like there's no doubt that some of the stuff, the wingspan is big. The shooting at that age from the full NBA line is most of the Ignite prospects can't do it. No one really,
right?
Apart from Tyler Smith, even the entirety of the Ignite program, no one's really been able to do that as a prospect. So that's where we get really interesting. And then the next guy that we're going to talk about is like, we're also in a situation where we go like, what the hell is this process? Like, where do we go from here? Because this was there's a lot of buzz around Trentyn Flowers at the beginning of the season as he left. I think, was it Louisville? Louisville, I think it was, that he was at. So. And then he was like complaining about the coach. And then he came down here to Australia, played for the Adelaide 36ers. And they were going to make him into a point guard. And then that didn't work really at all. And then he went back to a different role and he ended up playing like 13 minutes a night. He's 6'8", he's 19. It's a circuitous process to get here, and like lots of speed bumps along the way. I'll start by this question, Chuck. Like, are these speed bumps, the failed point guard experiment, the late decommit from Louisville, are these red flags?
I don't know the late decommit from Louisville. I think Louisville is the red flag, or has been the red flag. I wouldn't really put that on Trentyn. I think the failed point guard experiment is certainly something to clock. The fact that Adelaide wasn't good this year is also something to clock, because he hasn't really shown that he's contributed to winning. Now, I'm sure the players above him in the hierarchy weren't very good either there, but still, like, if you're taking someone, you want to take someone that you can really project to help you win. And I think it will take multiple years for Trentyn to reach that. However, though I don't think he is a point guard because I think he lacks ideal burst, that's probably what held him up in Australia, and it's, I think, what keeps him from being an on-ball guy in the NBA. He has his motor runs very, very hot. You know, he plays fast, and he's willing to do like just about anything. He'll set picks, 30 feet from the rim and then cut really hard into the lane, or try to relocate and cut into space off that. He rotates very, very hard. He'll defend on ball very hard. He has good lateral agility. He's sort of like the wing version of kind of what people maybe kind of want Bronny James to be.
Okay.
A little bit. Like, it's a similar kind of role, but Trentyn has better size to do it. Not to say that it's a one-to-one comparison, but like I could see him fulfilling sort of a defensive specialist role if he can knock down his threes. He forces transition. He's sort of like really pushes hard in transition. Like, he just plays really fast and really hard, carries himself like he's in an NBA game at all times. And I like that about him.
That size, the age, the, I guess, positional versatility. So I can't really find any sort of accurate. Here, 6'10" wingspan, so +2 on that, decent vertical. Like, he's got the size. He looks like he's a wing. He looks like he's a basketball player. He looks like, and as you said about the motor stuff and the ability to show that intensity is huge as well. Like, just the numbers are all like, basically all the numbers are terrible. Like, there's nothing that I like really about any of them. Like, a horrible assist to turnover ratio, bad free throws, bad effective field goal percentage. No real defensive numbers coming out there. But again, context is really important with this sort of stuff. But there's no statistical argument to say, yeah, he's good. Like, there's none. It's more about, like, I guess, vibes. It's about the pre this season stuff, the way that he was, touted coming out of high school, as well as I think he was a top 20 guy, maybe top 15 guy coming out this season. So there's I guess that stays a little bit sticky on that as well. I think, I don't know, he might not get picked in the draft, and I don't know that he'd end up on a two-way. He might end up going back international, but I don't know. It's been a weird sort of process. But I don't want to like talk too much more. Well, actually, I'm going to stop talking about him right now, about Trentyn Flowers, because I want to talk one last thing with you, Chuck, before we go. And I've done it, and I wish all these shows have blended in a little bit. I cannot remember who I talked to about this, but with Chomche, with Flowers, and with Lewis, we've got these three prospects. Prospects is the legit term here. It might take forever. They need the right environment. They are guys with weird situations that not many players coming into the NBA, if any, have had that same sort of arrangement coming through. So how do we project this stuff? I think that the way the G League currently is set up just doesn't allow these guys to be in a position that teams will invest in their development, because you have, like, if you draft a player and he's on a two-way, like, it's not that common for two-way guys to step out of that role and get onto main rotation things. It takes a long time. If you are, like, then signed to a regular second round contract with all these non-guarantees, the development in these players and the way that the rosters are set up, there's only 15 plus 3, that if teams cop injuries, they have to get called up and put into different roles. You can't just say, well, we've got you here, we're going to sit you for 2 years and you're going to play in the G League. We're going to run we've got this big development plan, and then you're 21, and then we see, because then by the end, rookie contract's over for these second round picks, and then it's like you got to make a decision what you're doing. So as much as I think we both like the idea of, like, there's something here, let's see how it develops, I don't think the current NBA structure allows teams to really sit and develop those players to that degree. how do you see that? Do you think that there are players who maybe slip through the cracks in terms of that development because teams don't have the luxury of being patient like that?
I think it's rare because I think if you have NBA talent, it comes out in the G League. I mean, usually, like if you track, well, I mean, you look at what Cam Whitmore did when they sent him to the G League at the beginning of the year, and he was like destroying it. They sent Amen Thompson down for one game, and it was like 39, 15, 12, and whatever.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, like, I think you need to understand what kind of a player you are drafting. Like I said, in Trentyn's case, he hasn't shown that he's been able to contribute to winning yet. So I can understand every team passing on him, and then it's going to be up to him to find the right environment, whether that's, G League on a non-two-way, just like a G League contract, or international to really grow his game to the point he's consistently affecting winning. I just see sort of the sketch of someone who can do that if he improves his shot. But I think in terms of like what you're talking about, I mean, going back to the one and dones in the second round. It's the big reason why they don't hit, because they are further away than they think. And the NBA teams just run out of patience, and they'll say, like, you know what, if you hit somewhere else, then okay, we'll take our chances beating you later. But we need to win right now, and we need to make moves right now. So it just depends on, I think, a case by case kind of thing.
I think you're right for a lot of that, and I think a lot of that sort of ties into what I was saying. Like, Amen and Cam Whitmore went down, and they were huge because we know that they were advanced prospects, but the system disincentivizes NBA team. Like you said, like they'll send, like, go find out, and then it's up to Trentyn to find the right team and the right fit for him to develop and then come back. Whereas in other sports, the team might be saying, "Oh, we actually want to develop you. We are in no rush to do any of this stuff. We have got a program to push you." But NBA teams aren't as interested in development because I think some of the roster constrictions mean that you don't have that luxury. You might have one guy that you're able to do that with, but you can't sort of develop a true farm system of like have development coaches. This is what we believe as a franchise versus like, you go figure it out and come back. We'll see you in 2 years and maybe we'll look at it. So it's just the way the system works, that these guys have to sort of fend for themselves to prove it versus the teams bringing them in and saying, right, we've got you now and we're going to work on this for 2 years with our people, our strength, all this stuff, minor league baseball style, right? To push them into this path. It might not work, but there's just no real ability for a team to do that, and nor are they interested in it at this point.
Yeah, and I think, that's where Trentyn being a higher profile recruit, like a top 20, I think he was 22 RSCI. It's like, well, did he sign with the right agency? Does the agency have his best interests in mind? And are they all aligned on their goals? Because a lot of the work in finding the right opportunity will come through them. So, like, yes, you need to have the right team and support system around you. You need to have the right decision makers, giving you advice. But I think that it's not like, when you say fend for themselves, I don't think it's as if a lot of these guys are just completely adrift at sea. It's just a matter of understanding the realistic paths to get where they want to go. That's all. And I'd agree. I wouldn't expect an NBA team to take you in and nurture you and bail you out.
No, it's just not the way.
Because
it's just not how it's set up. That's just how it is. Like, I'm not blaming the teams for doing this because it's literally like if they did that, it just doesn't work for them. Like, it's just not how any of this stuff is set up, and it might not ever be something that the NBA is interested in doing. It's just a slight difference, I guess, to the way that things can be done in hockey or baseball or even like European basketball, where these kids are there from their 14 and they work through the multiple junior levels and the B teams and all that sort of stuff, where it's just a different sort of a system, and that's totally okay as well. One thing was interesting, because I do need to get us both out of here, is you mentioned agent. Ulrich Chomche's agent is Rich Paul, so we'll see where that we'll see what ends up happening with that. But I thought that was a little interesting thing that I just noticed when I was going through some of his stuff. But Chuck, thank you for coming on and talking about some guys who there'll be many people who will go, I don't know who this bloke is at all, and hopefully we've shed some light on some of these prospects. Tell everyone what's happening over at the old Chucking Darts show at the moment.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm doing my, last stretch of shows before the draft. I've got about 4 more episodes lined up for sure before the draft. I'll have my board reveal in the next couple weeks. We'll see if I can write any other supplementary piece, but it's an really interesting cycle when everyone disagrees on who the best player is. That's where, it gets really fun for me. So Ron Holland's my number 1. So y'all can disagree with that if you want, but that's my guy. And
Chuck,
just pay attention, man. Yeah.
Chuck,
you don't like him?
I've got him at 2, Chuck. So like I
Oh.
feel like we're sort of sitting in this area where there's not many of us over there at the moment. But yeah, I've got him at 2, and I'm getting to the stage where I think it's relatively clear that I'm not pushing him any lower than 2. Like that's where I'm at with that. So yeah, it's good to hear someone else say that as well.
Yeah, he's great. Ron is incredible. Yeah, thank you so much, Josh, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Chuck. Thank you. So that's it. That's the draft prospects. Is there anyone that you think that I missed that I should have covered? I've got like a list of about 100 deep in my prospects. I don't think we need to go into many of those, but if they do get drafted or sign 2-way contracts when the draft happens, we'll go into those guys. And then the next draft content coming from me, probably tomorrow, is going to be my full first round mock draft. We'll see if there are any changes. I sort of gave it away there by telling you that Ron Holland's probably still going to be at 2. But that's how we're at with that mock draft. I look forward to seeing you guys all over on that video when it does come out, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.